greeting, buonasera a tutti, good evening, and thank you for connecting with us at I Am Books again. I am Chiara Durazzini and I am the event coordinator at the bookstore. I remind you that we are an independent bookstore in the heart of the North End, the Italian area in Boston. Beautiful t-shirt right there. So please, if you are in the area, come and visit. And today, this is gonna be a fabulous event. I was looking forward to it because we are having two of my favorite Italian-American authors, Annie Rachele Lanzillotto and Marianne Leone, and not Leone, Leone. So welcome, Annie and Marianne. I would like also to welcome our audience. And maybe the audience can perhaps write in the chat, or of course questions in the Q&A. They can write maybe where they are watching from, if they are in Boston, if they are in New York, or if they are somewhere else around the world. So, ciao Annie, and we have somebody already saying hello. Hi Marianne, we have two books here that I absolutely love. We have Mass Picks Up, yes, by Marianne, and we have the new book by Annie, Whaddyacall the Wind. Now, you have to know that they coached me about how to say this because it was a little hard for me. You know, I would say it in Tuscan accent. Come si chiama il vento? But, you know, the title is What Do You Call the Wind? Annie, tell us something about this title.
Well, everyone grows up with words that you hear spoken, and maybe they're not written words. So in the Bronx, my father would always say, what do you call? And who do you call? And who do you call did the what do you call down by the Whoozy-Watts. So what do you call is my madre, lingua madre. This is my Bronx mother tongue. So whoever's out there, you could drop a word in the chat or Q&A that you grew up with. How did your mother or father or grandmother or neighbor or zia speak? What was a word from your childhood?
Right. And they are telling me that the chat is unable. That is strange because I enabled it, but you know, sometimes I make mistakes. So feel free to write in the Q&A. We can still see it. But thank you for letting me know. So now let's be informal and let's read the bios as we usually do. We have here Annie Rachele Lanzillotto. She's an author, poet, performance artist, actor, director, songwriter, and activist who has promoted audience participation in hundreds of performances everywhere. Her books include Hard Candy, Peach Roll Yaw, L is for Lion, an Italian Bronx Butch Freedom memoir, a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award, and Schist Song. Lanzillotto was on the founding board of the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition. And, of course, this is the new book. And now we have Marianne Leone. She's the author of Jessie and Mass Picks Up, essays in the Boston Globe, Lit Hub, Solstice, Coastal Living, Bark, Post Road, and others. She had a recurring role on HBO's The Sopranos as Joanne Moltisanti, who hasn't seen that. She's Christopher's mother, and acted in films by John Sayles, Larry David, Martin Scorsese, Nancy Savoca, and David O. Russell. So welcome, welcome, welcome. let's see. We have people from Western Mass and American, Brooklyn, New York. What's a matter? What's a matter? Right. I need to take lessons. So thank you for letting us know. Manchester, Brooklyn. Oh, many New Yorkies. Okay, so let's maybe start with some reading. I will disappear. I will mute myself because I want for the two authors to have all the highlight and the focus. So.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to jump in with a story, and Marianne and I are going to go back and forth in 5-minute readings and banter. That's the plan for tonight. All right, Marianne, this one's for you. This is Whaddyacall the Wind? I'm starting with chapter 27, and I'm going to read an excerpt. Serpentine alleys. Walking the serpentine alleys of Acquaviva delle Fonti, looking for the chapel of San Rocco. I thought about his life. It was August 16th, 2018, the annual outdoor rosary for the feast day. And I was lost in the ancient alleyways where Grandma Rose was born. The doors of the houses opened directly into the stone street. I was walking in circles. I walked down the same street just a little while ago, Via Amapani, street of one who loves loaves of bread. Where was this church? I didn't know if it would be a big church or a little church. All I knew is that I would know it when I saw it, because there'd be a painting of St. Rocco and the little dog on the facade. In all the statues and paintings depicting St. Rocco, he's pointing to a lesion on his knee, the way we all point out our bloodied wounds to anybody who will listen, and to share in the awe of spiritual healing, of an ordeal of the flesh. St. Rocco's wound is not healed. A dog is always beside him, looking up at him with a big hunk of Italian bread in his mouth. For years, for my whole life, I thought St. Rocco must have been a lover of animals like St. Francis. Francis, you see with sparrows, and Rocco with a dog. But Rocco's story was entirely different. I walked through the small winding streets. I turned onto Via Sciroccazzo. That's one of my ancestral names. Generations ago, this street was named after my great Sciroccazzo somebody. Everything was quiet. I was aware of my lumbering footsteps. All of a sudden, out of the quiet, from a second-story balcony, Aretha's voice was blasting, and my shoulders automatically bopped into a rhythm. You better think, what you trying to do to me, yeah, think, let yourself be free. But who was playing Think on Via Sciroccazzo in Acquaviva delle Fonti Vecchio? I felt outed as an American. I felt America calling me in Aretha's chorus, freedom, 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 think. I couldn't help but sing along. I mean, this was an anthem for me. This was my spirit anthem. This was my national anthem. Aretha's Falcon Soprano is the greatest single achievement of the whole damn American experiment. I walked on to find the chapel, thinking about St. Rocco. St. Rocco was a healer. He helped victims of the plague, but then he got the plague himself, and he was banished from Piacenza because the sick were isolated. So Rocco retreated alone into the woods. He took shelter under boughs in a cave. As the days went on, Rocco was dying. Then one day, a little dog found him. And this little dog dedicated himself to Rocco's recovery by taking an Italian bread from his master's house every day and running through the woods with the loaf in his mouth and giving it to Rocco. Day after day, the devoted dog fed Rocco the loaf of Italian bread and licked his wounds. Some days the little dog refused to eat. Instead, he would run with his own loaf of bread through the woods to Rocco. The dog kept Rocco alive in the cave. The dog was owned by a nobleman named Palestrelli. Palestrelli wondered where his dog went every day, stealing a loaf of bread and running into the woods. So one day he followed the little dog, and the dog led him right to Rocco. Count Palestrelli was so inspired by Rocco's spirituality that he brought him home and nursed him back to health, and he became a devoted follower of St. Rocco. The dog is the real hero in the story, but the dog didn't have a name. So I was thinking what to call this dog. Meanwhile, I walked to find the church. The streets were completely silent. There wasn't one soul around. I was the only one walking. I turned onto Via Nicola Abruzzi. Then from a window again, Arita, booming rock steady. What it is, what it is, what it is. Wow, what it is, what it is, what it is. Arita's deep well of voice flooded the stone street. Arita amplified in Acquaviva delle Fonti. It was jarring, almost shocking, to walk these ancient stone streets as the alley swelled with her voice, as if the street was her throat. Arita stripped me bare. It was as if she was saying to me, how could you walk so austere, so quiet while you're alive? Where's your voice? Why do you match the quiet of these streets, the reverence? What voice is inside you? Let me hear that voice. Bare your soul. Show what's inside you. I was outed. I don't want to be quiet. I don't want to be contained. I want to yell, whatever. I don't want to be behaving in a set of systematione where there's a right way to do everything. And by default, I do everything wrong because I'm American. I don't want to try to achieve la bella figura and fail miserably. What I love about life is the messy improv, the artistry of making things by hand, creating bohemian uses for things, old things, the rulelessness. I missed ripped dungarees and dreadlocks, every kind of person, walking in every kind of style. And the New York way, there's no one way or no one time to do anything. All the rule breaking for every aspect of life. The glorious anonymity of New York City, and knowing that so much is going on every day, you'll never know what's going on, but you get in on what you can. What it is, what it is, what it is. It's impossible to hear Arita and not break into a dance step and open my throat to sing. All the suffering through all of history to forge this voice, this one, this Arita. The radio station announcer cut in, and I heard it over the balcony. Arita Franklin è morta. Arita died on the feast of St. Rocco? I found the chapel. It was a cave, one room. I saw the dog with the loaf of bread in his mouth, looking up at Rocco's wounded leg. And I thought, that's what I'll call the dog. Amapani, one who loves loaves of bread.
Beautiful.
I stepped inside the cave. The women were already doing the rosary. I sat on a bench against the cold stone wall. I didn't have rosary beads in my pocket. How could I not have rosary beads in my pocket? What do I do now? All the women looked at me and one asked me if I knew how to do the rosary. I said, "Sí." I was proud that I taught myself the Ave Maria in Italian as an adult. All those years at Catholic school, they didn't even teach us the Ave Maria in Italian or Latin, only English, and it doesn't translate. So I taught myself Ave Maria, but these women were professionals. They did all that micro rosary that I didn't know how to do. So when the lady who seemed to be in charge asked me to lead the rosary, I panicked. I said, no, per favore, no. And all the women looked and raised their eyebrows and said, Sach, she doesn't know. And it was true. I am the one who doesn't know. I am the one trying to find out. I am the one who asks questions. I am the one who listens. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Signore con te. And in the background, daydreaming and I'm thinking of you. Daydreaming and I'm thinking of you. Hey, baby, let's get away. Let's go somewhere far. Baby, can we? Where I don't care. Ave Maria, peccatori. What do you call the wind?
Bravissima.
Great to read to you, Marianne. I love it.
Well, you're talking about dogs, and from this, your last story was a hero dog, and my book that my agent is now shopping is called A 5-Dog Epiphany, because we've had 4 rescue dogs and 1 dog that we got for Jesse, our boy, and our 2 rescues, our elderly rescues who were 17 years old, died during pandemic, and we adopted 2 other new rescue girls. They're 6 and 8. Their names are Titi and Sugar. They sound like pole dancers. They're from Louisiana. And so I wrote a little piece about Titi. Nobody was adopting Titi because she was a fear biter, because the harness had grown into her flesh. She was kept in a cage her entire life and gave up one litter after another. So nobody was adopting her. So I will read what transpired after we adopted her. This was in the Globe last June. On the last page, they're in connections, and they supply the title, so it's called A Gentle Touch. I wouldn't have done that title, but whatever. Anyway, this is it. I'm still mourning Frenchie, my husband said. Frenchie and Lucky, our 17-year-old rescues, died during the pandemic. Lucky early in the year, then Frenchie in September, a pair of wounded healers who never knew they were healers. In October, COVID was rising. The 15th anniversary of our son's death was in January, and a bleak winter lay ahead. A dogless household seemed too depressing to bear. I began sneaking looks at Pet Binder. Titi, an undersized bichon frise, seduced me with her hopeful smile. Her origin story was grim. Kept in a backyard cage for the entirety of her 6 years, Titi birthed multiple litters, so neglected that her rescuers discovered the harness growing into her flesh. As a brutal result, Titi had become a fear biter. I could identify with a fear biter. I'd had to fight fiercely for our son Jesse to be recognized as a fully cognizant human being. He was born prematurely, and as the result of a cerebral hemorrhage, was quadriplegic and nonverbal. I would bite anyone who denied my son his humanity. This boy, who despite his physical limitations, was on the honor roll every year and wrote poetry on his adapted computer. At age 6, Jesse had sat on Santa's lap and summoned every bit of muscle control to blurt "dog" into Santa's ear. Goody appeared on Christmas morning and was his beloved first sibling for the rest of Jesse's life. A dog's presence in our house seemed to honor the memory of our son. Titi's smile telegraphed her resilience. I hoped it would be contagious. I presented her case to my husband until finally he agreed. Titi drew his blood on the first day. We were with her in our fenced-in backyard on a sunny, crisp November afternoon, like this. Titi's unbounded joy at running free was soul-stirring, and we basked in it. After many giddy circles, she flopped down near the raspberry bushes, and we were all ready to go inside. It was time for the maneuver we dreaded, picking TT up. We approached her warily. Chris stepped on the leash, but TT wriggled out of her harness, making capture almost impossible. We made blockades with lawn furniture, try to pinch her move, and surrounded her. No luck. TT's rescuers had told us to try throwing a towel over her first, but it made us feel like kidnappers or worse, complicit abusers, as we watched her thrash helplessly. When Chris stood over her, threw the towel and picked her up, she bit and he bled. It wasn't deep. Chris blamed himself. I'm a guy, he said. I'm wearing a hat. I loomed. He did loom. But the bloody bite was the start of a love story. During the first week in January, the week that pulls us into the anniversary of our most staggering loss, TT crept up from the end of the bed and licked Chris's hand in the dark. Within a week, she launched into a full body shimmy, if he even glanced her way. She was Marilyn Monroe. The fear biting was at an end, and the love fest had begun. I admit to having felt the tiniest bit jealous watching them morph into Lady and the Tramp, sharing a single strand of spaghetti, beaming love at each other while I was relegated to the stereotypical Italian waiter dishing up dinner. But whatever envy I have is soon overcome as I too am enveloped by the love blast emanating from those two. I know the energy that draws TT to Chris. It's the same gentleness and infinite patience that surrounded our son when he was with us. Chris lifting him from his wheelchair or playing video games, waiting for Jesse's wavering hand to hit his switch, or placing a little turtle into Jesse's hand. We lie in bed watching TT wiggle in ecstasy on her back. She burrows into the memory quilt of Jesse's t-shirts on our bed. And it's as if he too is embracing her and welcoming her home.
Oh my
It's
God. Beautiful.
She's the first time she stood up on her own hind legs and asked us to pick her up. I just cried. I can't get over her resilience. These dogs have such resilience after terrible, terrible abuse. So she's a little teacher. She's like, you know, Jessie was our first teacher and TT is now a teacher. She teaches us what it's like to come back from terrible loss, you know? So I'm very grateful for her.
Do you think people could be taught to not fear bite? You know what I mean? Like really out of trauma, not to snap, basically. I'm asking for someone I know very well.
I hear you. I don't really know, and I hope it's possible because there's a lot of fear biting going on in our country right now. And
yeah,
it just seemed that like we just were patient, and that seemed to bring her out of it. Chris said, after we had thrown the towel and she bit him, he said, you know, she built on our, we have this chaise lounge, and she built like a little pillow fortress and her head would periscope out. And all we did was go and sit beside her for a lot. We didn't do anything. We didn't try and pick her up. We just sat beside her until finally she trusted us. And she was like, I want in on what's going on up there on the couch. So that's what she became. So I'm hoping that's something that can be done with other people, but dogs teach us a lot, right?
I think you said about your new manuscript that who rescues who, right?
Right.
Didn't you say?
I mean, and you know, I had this happen to me when I was in Naples, the first year after Jessie died. We didn't want to be home for Christmas, so we're in Naples. I had a pack of dogs surround me. You know, they have wild dogs in Naples. Have you been there? There are dogs wandering around, right? So of course I reach out to the dog, and the dog puts his mouth around my arm. He doesn't close it. It's like an invitation to join his pack. And I mean, I felt it so strongly. Like maybe I should join these wild dogs of Napoli. I don't know.
Yes. So, no, there's a poem in this book. I'll dedicate this next couple of poems to two dogs in Naples, Nino and Sheila. My first night eating on the sidewalk, eating polpette, who comes up to me, Nino and Sheila. So I had to share my polpette with them. And I just thought this is the best thing.
Do they put their mouths on your arm?
No, they just wanted the meatballs. And I just thought this is the best thing in the world. And then even more impressive, I mean, if we get into this subject, it's the Sicilian stray dogs. It's very tragic and sad. And people are not always kind. People are very vicious. However, in Piazza Maggiore, where in World War II, the United States dumped tons of bombs on this neighborhood. And so it's bombed out. And it was basically leveled and not rebuilt. So now it looks like a ruin. And there's all stray dogs there. And surrounding Piazza Maggiore, there's great restaurants. So there's swordfish and pizza and steak and roasted steak. And the dogs don't beg. They know better. They're resigned that you don't get anything by asking. So they just lay in the shadows of the ruins. And then people leave their tin dishes of leftovers, steak, swordfish, all these things against the walls. But I looked at these dogs and I wrote about them in this book. I said, you know, it just impressed me that they know not to beg. I don't know. Maybe I'll pull up the line later. But listen, I read Jessie, and everyone out there, you got to read Jessie by Marianne, and also Ma Speaks Up. And as Marianne says about it, sometimes people don't buy the book Jessie because they think it's going to be depressing, but everything Marianne writes has wicked humor. It's embedded. She asked me to read a couple of poems, and she said this one made her cry. So I'm just going to read it.
My husband cried too.
All right. So for Marianne and Chris and Jessie and TT and what's the other dog's name?
Sugar
and Rosie the Riveter in the background there. Okay. So this is page 152 for anyone following along. Church bells and fisherman yells. Church bells and fisherman yells. But it was the pom-poms of Catania that brought me to my knees. The girl hand-painting fans in the alley, caressing brushstrokes, the colors, all the colors together on everything, from ceramics to straw bags, hats, yellow, red, black, green, blue, carrozza colors, whacked me behind the knees. The same colors we crocheted blankets with, 3 generations of us. I never realized till this moment how mezzogiornese it was, what we were doing, embellishing, Italianifying our gray and green and black Bronx world with the carrozza color palette. I wondered as a kid why we used all those colors at once. Orange, even lime green, light and dark and royal blues. My mother and grandmother gave me a total freedom I was rarely offered. What color to follow what color on the tip of my little hook. Like the Catanese girl painting fans, my mother painted designs on milk pails, how she embellished our world. So we overcame our own volcano dust that settles after internal explosions. She made purple pom-poms for everything. Purple pom-pom for the antenna of our car, so we could spot it in the big parking lots. Purple pom-pom for my black suitcase, so I could distinguish it coming down the airport belt. Purple pom-poms for the tops of hats. Pom-poms for the bottom fringe of ponchos. Pom-poms for blankets. Pom-poms for booty ties. Pom-poms of all sizes. A world of pom-poms. And one thing about a pom-pom is it makes you smile. A pom-pom is a praise song. This is what I came all this way for then, to sit and down an espresso con panna in Piazza degli Elefanti, listen to the accordion fade across the square, and cry for my mother all over again, and vow to make purple pom-poms of my own for everybody. It's very hard to make a pom-pom, though. I tried. I made a big mess. I made a big
The
mess.
crochet? Is it a crochet thing?
No, you don't crochet
Okay,
it.
you try.
No, to make a pom-pom, you take, like, let's say a matchbook or a piece of cardboard, something like this.
Right.
And you wrap.
Oh, and then you spread it around.
And then you cut and you tie a knot and then you shape. And my mother was a master at making tight, round pom-poms. Me, I make a mess. It's just not, I don't know, it doesn't look too good. And I waste a lot of wool. You know what I mean? So
my excuse was the left-handedness. My mother crocheted beautiful baby outfits and Afghans and all that stuff, but I couldn't do any of that. I mean, I could barely write. Yeah, but all geniuses are left-handed. You know this, right?
Michelangelo, Muhammad Ali,
Marianne Leone. But
Marianne
my
Leone.
mother, the next thing I'm going to read from is my Ma Speaks Up, and tell you about my mother came here when she was 16 or 18. I'm not sure which, because they get things wrong at Ellis, right? And she came here to ironically escape fascism and an arranged marriage, which seems amazing when you tell it in this day and age, doesn't it?
What year did she come? What year did she come?
I think it was 1936. So the war was already going on. She had already been marching. Her father was a Mussolini supporter because he owned property. And she had already, you know, marched with her little baby doll in a Balila uniform, which is what they did with girls, because you were basically a vessel to bring forward children. And that was it. You know, women couldn't go to university once the fascists got into power. Kind of like what they're thinking of doing here. Anyway, when immigrants come here, my mother was really closed-mouthed about why she came, she didn't tell me her backstory at all. You know, she was this big mystery. And I don't know if it's because they feel like, you know, she wouldn't be interested anyway, or what. But my mother told me basically a fairy tale about coming here. And she didn't tell me the truth until she was 80. And then I found out the real story behind it, because she had this kind of, even though my mother was a maverick and she broke a lot of rules, she didn't go to mass, she didn't do any of that stuff. She sent me to parochial school, but she never said the word nuns without the fucking and nuns always looking for money. So you tell me, but she was a mystery to me. And I didn't find out until, you know, we were both really older, what really happened to her. Which I don't want to give away, because if you get the book, you'll find out. It's so
was she protecting you, or what was she protecting?
No, I honestly think immigrants just feel like they'll never understand. She's a privileged little child with, and we were showered, I will say, we were showered with everything that they didn't have. You know what I mean? I never asked for bicycles or whatever. They were into it. They were, you know, they were delighted because they could actually do this. You know what I mean? My teeth were all rotted out of my mouth by the time I was 7 because of all the candy they gave us. They didn't have candy, you know? So it was, but my mother still had it tough. She loved my father. They were madly in love, but he died at 50. She was 43, widowed, English as a second language, no actual skills outside of cooking, and 3 kids. So, you know, it was tough. And she made her way. She became a cook at this restaurant and waited, you know, it was a mob restaurant. She booked numbers for wise guys. She was a tough cookie, but she was amazing. I respected her very much for what she did. And we became friends finally, even though we were mortal enemies growing up. Were you mortal enemies with your mother growing up? And then later you became friends?
We went through a very rough period. Yeah, we went after the vicious divorce. I became my father basically in the relationship. So we went through a hard time. We really did. But
How old were you when that was going on?
My mother, I was neonatal. I was born to make peace in this family, and I, failed. But my mother was asked as a single mother also to make book for a bookie. He said, I'll double your rent if I could use your phone 1 hour a week.
Ooh.
And but she said no. She said no.
Well, I came home and my mother very casually mentioned, she was like, I had dinner with a jewel. I said, are you dating a jeweler? And my sister's at the table. She says, Angiulo, who's the mob guy in the North End, right, at the time. And I go, are you dating this guy? And she was like, no, nice guy. I said, I heard she's a nice guy. That was it.
That was it.
There was no more discussion. So is it my turn to read or yours? No, my turn.
No, go ahead. Yeah, launch into the story.
Okay. So when Chris and I got married, we kind of eloped because Chris is from the Midwest and I just could picture it. I thought it was going to be like a nightmare. So we basically eloped, and his parents didn't meet my family until we'd been married for 2 years.
Wow.
And called Ma Gets the Last Word. Don't say fuck to the Coopers. I gripped Ma by both elbows and looked into her eyes. I was nervous. She shrugged me away, irritated, and headed back into her kitchen domain to produce one of her classic dinners. My newly acquired upright citizen in-laws were in town from Kansas City and about to meet my family for the first time, even though my husband and I had been married for 2 years. I was on a random visit home when my mother-in-law phoned to say that she and my father-in-law were at Mass Eye and Ear to deal with his detached retina. My husband, Chris, was in London performing in a Tennessee Williams play directed by Harold Pinter, but that oddball juxtaposition was not as bizarre as the one about to happen in my childhood home. The Leones and the Coopers had never met because Chris and I had eloped, if that's what you call it when you live together for 5 years and decide to avoid future bureaucratic hassles by legalizing the situation in as low-key a way as humanly possible. That meant telling both sides of your family that you had summer stock in a few weeks and no time for an elaborate wedding. Now, my husband was getting to act with Lauren Bacall in London, and I was left to wrangle the relatives meeting for the first time ever across a chasm as wide and mysterious as the Sargasso Sea. When I wasn't considering and discarding various revenge scenarios for Chris in my head, I was stamping down my teenage id, fear, and shame demons that had arisen from the place kept at bay by my newfound happiness with Chris. I had met my in-laws before this impromptu visit to our house, and we had spent our first Christmas as husband and wife with them. When we drove up to their home, I suddenly channeled my mother. I turned to him and said, "What the fuck, Chris? Get guts. You didn't tell me you lived in a national monument." I was intimidated by the looming 3-story Southern colonial mansion sitting in front of a fountain on a grand boulevard, whose white crenellated pillars stood like a phalanx of bodyguards already deeming me unworthy to cross the threshold. Once inside, I found myself reverting to my trisyllabic word posture, the shield from my uncertain teen years. "Let's go into the library," Chris's mother said, her Texas accent turning library into library. "How magnanimous," I stuttered, noting with fleeting terror the spaghetti sauce bubbling on the stove as we passed quickly through the tiny kitchen. We wound our way through the stately dining room, past the grand staircase, through a Versailles-like living room, and into the library. "Take pictures," my family suggested when I described the house to them later that night. I wondered how Chris's mother would react to my documenting her house like an insurance adjuster after a flood. I was right to be terrified of the tomato sauce, as it turned out. My jaw dropped as I watched Chris's mother boil the pasta in the sauce. And it kept coming back like a vampire's dregs for 3 consecutive nights. My mother-in-law added some ketchup to the thankfully near depleted sauce on the last night it appeared on the menu. I honed my acting skills to new heights and later lay in bed with Chris, stomach growling. On Christmas Eve, when my family was having La Vigilia, a 7-course feast featuring pasta alla vongola, stuffed calamari, shrimp, and cod, my family called. What are they having? My Aunt Delle asked, grabbing the phone from my mother. I was too depressed to answer. Mom, Marianne wants your recipe for the Jell-O mold, Chris said after I hung up. He quirked his eyebrows at me and smiled his most devilish grin. Miracle Whip, she answered. I stared at the green alien glob quivering before me and prayed for release. By the time my in-laws arrived at Ma's house, I was twitching and clearing my throat with a tick-like regularity not seen since my days as a first grader, terrified by the yawning gates of hell. Social awkwardness, pungent as my mother's tomato sauce, permeated the air around the dinner table. My Aunt Sarah and Uncle Joe sat side by side, mute, corpse-like smiles plastered on their faces. Upon my in-laws' arrival, my mother had groveled, salaaming before my mother-in-law's tall, blonde, all-American good looks. "You're so beautiful," she crooned, like a plain-song chant of appeasement. The other Mrs. Cooper, Marianne, yes, we have the same name, beamed with noblesse oblige. I thought of the stately portrait of Marianne in a celestial blue gown gracing her formal dining room, as if to distract from the food served there. My own family's arts and crafts dining room looked kitschy and cramped, but the food was spectacular. I watched my handsome father-in-law eating his lasagna with relish. We got through the dinner, I thought, with relief as the meal wound to a close. But while I made coffee in the kitchen, I heard my mother's voice from the other room, loud and defiant. I got back in time for the raised finger jab, punctuating the buck. No! She looked fierce, like she was channeling Anna Magnani via Benito Mussolini. When I want to die, I die. Now, Linda, you can't just, came the aggrieved voice of my father-in-law, cut short by another more decisive no from Ma. At the end of the day, Ma won the argument on euthanasia by sheer force of will. When I want to die, I die, was her coup de grace, delivered with the force of a karate punch to the throat. But she never once said fuck to the Coopers. Krista's mother deemed Ma a spitfire, and my mother's only remark about her, sotto voce, when she was out of earshot was, yeah, she looking nice, but don't cross her, right? An astute observation, as it turned out. That's that. That was true.
I could hear about your mother all day and all night. Like
Do you know that my friends still quote her?
I don't even know what to say. She's
I wish
one of
you
the
had met her,
all-time
Annie.
greats.
She would have loved you. She would have loved you.
Well,
I mean,
but now
she
let me
made
ask you a question, because she needs to be a film character, don't you think? I mean, don't you think you got to take from
well,
the page?
the Christina stories I wrote, I made up everybody except for the Christina is kind of autobiographical, but the mother, I thought, you know what? I can't really replace.
Who would play?
My
Would
mother.
you play your mother at this point, or who would play your mother?
No, I'm not. I would get somebody, I mean, hopefully you would get somebody like great, like Marissa Tomei or somebody who could, somebody with spunk. I don't know, I don't know. She basically, I wrote the Christina stories as a pilot, which I have someone producing right now. So we'll see who Ma is. Ma turns out to be, right?
Is it in production or pre-production or what?
No, she's shopping it now, the producer.
All right. I can't wait.
So everything's floating around.
All right. I got a story for you, Marianne.
Let's hear it.
I know you didn't read this yet, so I'm really looking forward to telling you this story. Page 229, chapter 24, in Whaddyacall the Wind. And I got to say, buy books from I Am Books. So
yes,
they told me tonight that this book set a record for sales at I Am Books. So thanks for everybody. Yeah, thanks for everyone who went to their website. I think Chiara put it in the chat or the Q&A. It's really important to buy books. And right now I'm in Dublin, the greatest city for writers ever. And you think about this young man, James Joyce. Thumbs up, Chiara. You think about this young man, James Joyce. He's looking out at the water. He calls the water, it's like the queen, what does he call it? Well, first he says the snot green sea. So you have a young man comparing the sea to snot. Then he says the scrotum tightening sea. These lines now have immortalized Dublin. And the whole city now celebrates every word he wrote, every building he was in, and not just him. Yeats, St. Bridget, I mean, Oscar Wilde, so many writers. But wherever you go, to the Joyce Museum or to the tower where Ulysses begins, who you see celebrated are the women who saved his life, who nursed him when he was sick, who anonymously gave him money to stay alive, and who published him when his books couldn't get published.
Shakespeare and Company.
Yeah. And I love that the helpers are honored in Dublin. Yeah. Not like this man's work is some miracle that dropped out of the sky. No, there's a cadre of women that make his literature in the world. And I just want to take a moment and not only thank I Am Books and Bordighera Press, but every one of you that are out there that have supported me in my illnesses, plural, in my poverty, in my desperation and isolation, all of it. Thank you for keeping me in the game. And this next step is to keep buying multiple books from I Am Books, because they're my Shakespeare and Company. I Am Books is the bookstore that has an author page for Annie Lanzillotto. I mean, that's the place. Otherwise, it's me shouting into the wilderness. So let's keep the sales up, and the holidays are coming. Buy them for everybody, because look, at the end of the day, what matters in life? Pass on a good story.
That's right.
What matters to a young girl who's 12? Tell her a good story. Give her something to hang on to. And when I'm depressed and panicked, what do? I think of the stories of my ancestors. Without the stories, we're nothing. Okay, Marianne, you ready for a story?
I'm ready.
Our hometown saint, Beato Giacomo. All my life, I heard his name, Beato Giacomo, but I didn't know anything about him. My aunts and uncles gave me his holy medals and holy cards where he held his big bastone or he was on his knees staring up in adoration at La Madonna. When I got to Bitetto, I parked close to the church entrance. I stepped out of the car, and right at my feet, I found a shiny gold coin. That's my father talking to me, telling me I'm on the right path. My father always spun quarters with me since I was a baby. Quarters he flicked into fast, shiny silver pirouettes across the maple dining room table, hypnotizing me. He could get 6 going at once. And now as a spirit, he tosses coins at my feet wherever I walk. It's metallurgy. The dead move coins. I walked into the church feeling lucky. I stepped up to the altar, and there above the altar was a glass coffin. Inside the glass coffin was Beato Giacomo himself. He was right there. I wasn't prepared for this. I mean, nobody told me. His whole body, wearing his Franciscan robe, he was incorrupto, uncorrupted. Rigor mortis never set in. His hands were folded, he was barefoot, and he looked like my father. He's got the brow like a Lanzillotto, the blunt nose, the lips that are full on the bottom, and a kind expression. So I talk out loud to him. I said, listen, Beato Giacomo, thanks a lot for curing me of the cancers. I mean, I know my aunts did all the novenas to you. So I came all this way and I had to say thank you. But frankly, I didn't expect to see you laying there in a glass coffin. Nobody told me. So I got to go clear my head. So I walked around the church. I came up to a little reliquary, gold and glass. Next to the reliquary was a sign. It said, Il dito di Beato Giacomo, the finger of Beato Giacomo. And inside the glass case was a big finger with 3 joints. I said, but why is his finger not with the body? Why is it in another part of the church? And a little old man named Giuseppe came up to the finger and face to face started praying to the finger. So I asked him about the finger, and he told me the story. 400 years ago, there was a duchess, the Duchess of Gravina, and she came to worship the body of Beato Giacomo. So she came to Bitetto, and she asked the Franciscan brothers if they could open up the glass crypt so she could kiss his hand. Baciare la mano is still considered a great honor to kiss the hand. The year was 1619, and her name was Felicia di San Severino. Since she was a duchess, the Franciscans said, okay. So they nodded, they unlocked the glass crypt, and Felicia went next to Beato Giacomo and bent down to kiss his hand. But instead of kissing the hand, she opened her mouth and bit off his finger. She hid the finger. I could see clearly that she tucked the finger inside her brassiere, because I know where Italian women tuck things. There's all the nicknames for this special hiding place. Some call it il banco, the bank. And I've seen women tuck a variety of things in il banco. Now, where else would a Baresi woman hide a finger that she just bit off a dead saint who's been dead for hundreds of years?
Oh my God.
She stepped down, thanked the Franciscan monks, and headed for the door rapidly. The brothers opened the giant church doors to escort her out. But the sky turned black. The winds came, furious winds, and rain, boiling, thunder, took hold of the chapel doors and ripped them open like sails. The monks wrestled with the wind so the doors wouldn't blow right off their rusty hinges. The monks couldn't get the doors closed again. Il Sciorocco raced up from the Sahara, over the Mediterranean, hot, humid, low, spiraling sand into Felicia's eardrums, making her Sciroccazzo, crazy from the wind, from the sand whirling in the tunnels of her ears. Il Maestrale came across the Adriatic, swirling, fickle, lifted her gown, snapped her cape, ripped the mantilla off her head, and sweeping down from the mountains, down the spine of the boot, the cold tramontana whipped an ice-cold smack across the Duchess's face. Felicia fell to her knees and cried. She revealed the finger out of her brassiere to the Franciscan brothers and confessed. She told them that she coveted it for her private collection of saints' bones. But apparently, she figured, Beato Giacomo didn't like this idea. On the spot, on her knees in the chapel, she declared two vows. One, that she would fund a gold and glass reliquary where the finger could be adored for the rest of time. And two, that in this labyrinthian town, she would construct a straight street, the straightest street anyone had ever seen, directly from the glass crypt of Beato Giacomo through to the town hall, so that no one would ever get lost trying to find our hometown saint. And the sky quieted and turned a baby blue. And for every year on April 27th, since then, male devotees of my father's town, Bitetto, dress in skirts and veils and powder blue capes and white gloves, and they carry a bier of white roses through the streets. And on the roses is the reliquary with the finger of Beato Giacomo.
That's an insane and a great story.
I'd love to see you play the Duchess, Marianne. Marianne, would you play the Duchess and bite the saint's finger off for me?
I don't know, but I was offered a role recently that I get to stab someone in Sicily. So that's close, isn't it? I said, you're going to pay me to stab someone in Sicily? I'll do it for free. Just promise me you'll do 1 million takes so I can think about who I'm stabbing each time.
Oh,
Well, these were awesome, awesome, awesome readings. We have a couple of questions from our friends in the audience. So, and I just want to tell everybody that tomorrow I will email our wonderful writers all the chat, so they will they will be able to read it, you know, when they're home, relaxing, and you know, go through all of the things you wrote. So we have a couple of questions that I liked. One was, I'm not sure I can find it again, but one was about your creative process. And if you have a ritual. I love that, you know, I love that question, because I think all of us who are artists in any kind of different ways, we do have rituals, and we usually have, you know, the same creative process, more or less. So who started? Annie?
I just want to say my mentor, Joe Papaleo, told me when you wake up, don't brush your teeth. Just sit in the chair and write. So that's my advice to writers. Don't brush your teeth. That was Joe's advice to me. And you know what? He's right, because once you brush your teeth, then you take your medication, then you have breakfast, then the phone rings, and then it's noon and you need a nap, and books don't write themselves. These are thousands of hours with the S in the chair. That's it. S in chair. Don't brush your teeth, and that's it. That's all. There's no other real advice. There's no other advice.
I agree. That's awesome. How about you, Marianne?
Well, mine changes. It's like it changes at different times. Like if I'm in the beginning part, there's not a lot of writing. There's a lot of thinking and walking around and doing other things like me. And I'm lucky that I live near woods and I can, you know, do that. When I'm in the middle of writing something, I really love it because that's the part where you're like addicted to what's going on in your book, and you can't even pull yourself away from it, and you happily spend hours on it. It doesn't matter whether it's day or night. For me, I work a lot at night, and then I revise in the morning. But yeah, and I guess.
And do you have any particular ritual before you start writing, or I don't know, maybe?
Are you asking about the candles?
Breathing? I don't know. Yeah.
I don't have any rituals, no. And I can write in madness. I can write in the middle of cacophony because I was used to that when we had Jesse and we had tutors in the house and a caregiver and kids coming in and out and dogs. I'm just used to, you know, crazy madness. So I can do it. I can go into a zone. It's been something I've carefully cultivated.
Wonderful.
I think a lot of women who have kids have had to cultivate this. So this resource.
It's funny in the James Joyce house, they or one of that. It's not where he lived, but they call it the house. But they make his room, and they said he had to be around cacophony, that he wanted to be in the center. And I relate to that. I like the chaos all around me. And then I go in a submarine in my head.
Is it because we came up with like really loud household of voices and
it has to be? Yeah, the chaos.
I wonder if that's it. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, somebody was asking if we, IM Books, send books to the UK. Unfortunately, we don't, because the mailing is very expensive. Yeah. So, sorry. Sorry,
Well,
maybe you can find a way.
But any bookstore could order the books. Any book, or Amazon or any book.
Exactly.
Don't go to evil Amazon. You can go
Don't go to Amazon. Don't go to Amazon, but maybe other
bookstore, right? A local bookstore could order the books, right?
Exactly.
Or
yes.
bookshop.org. bookshop.org.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
my friends, this was beautiful. I hope we can do it again. Again, don't worry for all the marvelous, amazing chat, all the beautiful things you all wrote, because I will send them to our guests. Please come to our next events. We have so many and we want people there. They're going to be fun. So check our calendar on our website, or, subscribe to our newsletter. And with this, I want to say grazie mille to Annie, Rachele, Lanzillotto, and Marianne Leone. They are amazing, amazing authors and amazing books. Thank you all. Yes, and Jess.
You have Jessie in Italian too, right? At the store. It's you have the Italian version too. Yeah. That's
So
cool.
all of you, you have the discount, 10% with the code. Buy the book, because these are amazing, amazing. And we had a little example tonight. So thanks again, Manny. Thanks again, Marianne. Thank you all for coming and connecting and staying with us. And we'll see each other soon, I hope. Arrivederci.
Grazie a tutti. Thanks everyone for being here this hour. Thank you so much.
Annie, safe travels home.
I am home.
Yes.
I'll see you soon. I'll see you
You
very
got to
soon.
be, we are home together. That's the only home there is.
Really fun,
Arrivederci.
Annie.
Arrivederci.
Grazie Chiara and I Am Books, Nicola. Grazie a
Thank you.
tutti.
Grazie a voi. Arrivederci.
Stata